The morning sun cast long shadows across the community college parking lot as Lisa stepped out of her old Honda Civic. The car door creaked as she closed it, a sound that had become as familiar as her daily routine. At 28, she was used to being the oldest person in most of her classes, but today felt different somehow. Today was the first day of her music appreciation course, and she couldn't shake the nervous feeling in her stomach. She pulled her worn leather bag higher on her shoulder and walked toward the music building. Her sneakers made soft squeaking sounds on the polished floor as she navigated the hallways, following the room numbers until she found classroom 204. Through the small window in the door, she could see students already seated, most of them looking barely out of high school. Their bright backpacks and designer clothes made her feel even more out of place. Taking a deep breath, Lisa pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room buzzed with conversation as students chatted about their weekend plans and upcoming assignments. She chose a seat in the back corner, hoping to blend into the background as she always did. Her simple gray sweater and faded jeans were a stark contrast to the trendy outfits around her. But she had learned long ago that drawing attention to herself rarely led to anything good. Professor Williams entered the room with a stack of papers under his arm and a coffee mug in his hand. He was a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and thick-rimmed glasses that he constantly adjusted. As he set his things down on the desk, his eyes swept across the classroom, taking note of each student. When his gaze landed on Lisa, she saw the familiar look of mild surprise and perhaps a hint of judgment that she had grown accustomed to over the years. "Welcome to Music Appreciation," Professor Williams began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "I see we have quite a diverse group this semester." His eyes flickered toward Lisa again, and she felt herself shrinking further into her seat. "This course will challenge you to think beyond your current understanding of music and explore the rich history of classical composition." As he spoke, Lisa found herself studying her hands, which rested quietly on the small desk attached to her chair. These hands had a story that no one in this room could possibly imagine. The calluses on her fingertips, barely visible now after years of neglect, told of countless hours spent practicing scales and perfecting difficult passages. Her left hand bore a small scar near the knuckle, a reminder of a childhood accident that had nearly ended everything before it began. The professor continued his introduction, explaining the course requirements and expectations. Lisa half listened, her mind wandering to the reasons that had brought her to this place. After dropping out of high school to work and support her family, she had promised herself that someday she would finish her education. That someday had finally arrived, though it had taken much longer than she had originally planned. Her younger brother needed surgery that insurance wouldn't cover, and her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Lisa had been the one to sacrifice her dreams, taking on night shifts at the local diner and weekend work at a grocery store. Education had become a luxury she couldn't afford, until a scholarship program for non-traditional students had given her this chance. "Now, let's go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves," Professor Williams announced. "Tell us your name, your major, and what you hope to get from this course." Lisa's heart rate quickened as she realized the introductions would eventually reach her. She listened as her classmates spoke about their music education majors, their dreams of becoming performers or teachers, and their extensive backgrounds in choir, band, and private lessons. Each introduction made her feel smaller and more out of place. "I'm studying to be a music therapist," said a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair. "I've been playing violin since I was 4, and I'm hoping this class will help me understand how different musical periods can be used in therapeutic settings." "I'm in the education program," added a young man with a confident voice. "I want to teach high school band, and I need to understand classical music theory better to help my future students appreciate the foundations of modern music." As the introductions moved closer to her corner of the room, Lisa felt her palms growing sweaty. What could she possibly say that would sound legitimate next to these accomplished young musicians? She had no formal training to speak of, no degree to work toward in music, and certainly no impressive background to share. "And you?" Professor Williams was looking directly at her now, his pen poised over his attendance sheet. "I'm Lisa," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the hum of the air conditioning. "I'm working toward a general studies degree, and I needed an arts credit. She paused, knowing how underwhelming her reason sounded compared to the passionate statements from her classmates. I guess I just want to learn more about music. The professor nodded and made a note on his paper, but Lisa could see the disappointment in his expression. She was clearly not the type of student he was used to teaching, someone who was here out of necessity rather than genuine passion for the subject. What Professor Williams and her classmates couldn't know was that Lisa's relationship with music ran deeper than any of theirs possibly could. Hidden beneath her plain exterior was a history that would have shocked them all. The small apartment she shared with her mother contained a secret that she had kept buried for 5 long years. A baby grand piano that sat silent in the corner of her bedroom, covered with a sheet and surrounded by boxes of sheet music that she couldn't bear to look at. That piano had once been her entire world. From the age of 5, when her grandmother first placed her tiny hands on the keys, Lisa had shown a natural talent that had amazed everyone who heard her play. Her grandmother, a retired piano teacher, had recognized something special in the little girl who could play complex melodies by ear after hearing them just once. By the time she was 10, Lisa was performing in local recitals and competitions, always placing first or second, despite having no formal training beyond what her grandmother could provide. Her parents, struggling to make ends meet, had managed to scrape together enough money for a few lessons with a proper instructor. But it was clear that Lisa's talent far exceeded what they could afford to nurture. The turning point had come when she was 15. A talent scout from a prestigious music conservatory had heard her perform at a regional competition and offered her a full scholarship. For the first time in her life, Lisa had seen a future that didn't involve financial struggle and constant worry about making ends meet. She had dreamed of concert halls and recording contracts, of traveling the world and sharing her gift with audiences who would appreciate the beauty she could create. But life had other plans. Just weeks before she was supposed to start at the conservatory, her father had been injured in a construction accident, leaving him unable to work. The medical bills piled up quickly, and Lisa had made the painful decision to stay home and help support her family. She had told herself it would be temporary, that she would find a way to pursue her dreams later. Later had never come. Years passed and the responsibilities only grew heavier. Her father's condition worsened, requiring more care and more money for treatments. Her mother developed her own health problems, and Lisa found herself working multiple jobs just to keep the family afloat. The piano in her room gathered dust, and the dreams she had once held so tightly slowly faded into memory. Now, sitting in this classroom surrounded by young people who still believed in their dreams, Lisa felt the weight of all those lost years. She had convinced herself that music was behind her, that she had moved on and found peace with her choices. But being here, in this environment where music was the focus of everything, she could feel something stirring inside her that she had tried so hard to suppress. As Professor Williams began explaining the syllabus and course expectations, Lisa found herself really listening for the first time in years. Despite her nervousness and feelings of inadequacy, there was something exciting about being in a place where music mattered again. She might not belong here in the obvious way that her classmates did, but perhaps there was still room for someone like her, someone who had loved music so deeply that losing it had felt like losing a part of herself. 3 weeks had passed since Lisa first walked into Professor Williams' music appreciation class, and she had settled into a comfortable routine of listening quietly and taking careful notes. She always arrived a few minutes early to claim her usual seat in the back corner, where she could observe without being noticed. The other students had formed their little groups and friendships, but Lisa remained on the outside, which suited her just fine. On this particular Tuesday morning, Professor Williams walked into the classroom with an unusually serious expression. He set down his coffee mug with more force than usual, causing a small splash to escape onto his desk. The students, who had been chatting about their weekend plans, gradually quieted down as they sensed his mood. "Today we're going to discuss your final project," he announced, adjusting his glasses as he always did when he was about to deliver important information. "This project will count for 30% of your final grade, so I expect you all to take it seriously." A collective groan rose from the classroom. Lisa watched as several students exchanged worried glances, already dreading whatever assignment was coming their way. She had been doing well on the quizzes and written assignments, but the thought of a major project made her stomach tighten with anxiety. Each of you will be required to perform a musical piece, Professor Williams continued, ignoring the looks of panic spreading across his students' faces. This performance will demonstrate your understanding of the classical music we've been studying this semester. You'll need to research the historical context of your piece, understand its musical structure, and present it to the class. The blonde girl who wanted to be a music therapist raised her hand immediately. Professor Williams, what level of difficulty are we talking about? I mean, some of us have more experience than others. The professor nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly why I'll be assigning pieces individually, based on each student's background and abilities. Those of you with extensive musical training will be given more challenging works, while others will receive pieces more appropriate to their skill level. Lisa felt a small wave of relief wash over her. At least she wouldn't be expected to perform something completely beyond her current abilities. She had been honest about her lack of formal training during her introduction, so surely Professor Williams would give her something simple and manageable. Over the next few minutes, the professor called out names and assigned pieces. The violin girl received a Bach partita, while the future band director was given a Mozart sonata movement. Each assignment seemed carefully matched to the student's stated experience level, and Lisa began to relax as she waited for her turn. Mitchell, you'll be performing Chopin's Minute Waltz, Professor Williams announced to a young man who had mentioned years of piano lessons. And Rodriguez, I'm assigning you Debussy's Clair de Lune. Lisa half listened as the assignments continued, her mind already wondering what simple piece she might receive. Perhaps something from a beginner's songbook or maybe a folk melody that wouldn't require too much technical skill. She was mentally preparing herself to spend extra time in the practice rooms, slowly working through whatever basic piece came her way. Thompson, the professor's voice cut through her thoughts. Lisa looked up, realizing he was addressing her. You'll be performing Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. The words hit her like a physical blow. Lisa's pen slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the small desk, the sound seeming unnaturally loud in the suddenly quiet classroom. She stared at Professor Williams, certain she had misheard him. I'm sorry, what did you say? She managed to whisper. Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, he repeated, making a note on his paper. It's quite a challenging piece, but I think it will push you to really understand the complexity of Romantic period composition. Lisa felt the blood drain from her face. Around her, she could hear the other students whispering among themselves. She caught fragments of their conversations. That's like super hard. And isn't that one of the most difficult pieces ever written? And poor girl, she has no idea what she's getting into. The piece Professor Williams had just assigned her was no simple melody or beginner's exercise. It was one of the most technically demanding works in the entire piano repertoire, a piece that professional pianists spent months preparing for concert performances. The ballade was known for its emotional intensity, its complex harmonies, and its brutal technical requirements that could challenge even the most accomplished musicians. What made the situation even more surreal was that Lisa knew this piece intimately. She had performed it countless times during her teenage years, and it had been one of her signature works during competitions. The irony was so intense it was almost funny, if the situation hadn't been so humiliating. Professor, she started to say, her voice shaking slightly, I think there might be some mistake. I told you I don't have much musical background, and this piece sounds very complicated. Professor Williams looked at her over his glasses with what appeared to be a mixture of impatience and condescension. Ms. Thompson, I understand this will be challenging for someone with your limited experience, but I believe in pushing students beyond their comfort zones. Sometimes we don't know what we're capable of until we're forced to try. The way he said limited experience made Lisa's cheeks burn with embarrassment. She could feel the eyes of her classmates on her, some looking sympathetic, others barely hiding their amusement at her obvious distress. Besides, Professor Williams continued, you have 8 weeks to prepare. That should be plenty of time to work through the piece. even if you have to take it slowly. There are practice rooms available in the music building, and I'm sure some of your more experienced classmates might be willing to offer advice if you ask nicely. The condescending tone in his voice was unmistakable now. Lisa realized that this wasn't an accident or a mistake in judgment. Professor Williams had deliberately assigned her the most difficult piece possible, either as some kind of twisted motivation technique, or simply because he enjoyed watching her squirm. Perhaps he thought she would drop the class rather than attempt such an impossible task. I really don't think I can handle something this advanced. Lisa tried one more time, her voice barely above a whisper. Nonsense, Professor Williams replied briskly. I have complete faith in your ability to rise to the occasion. After all, you said you wanted to learn more about music. What better way than to dive deep into one of the greatest piano works ever? Composed? The class period continued with Professor Williams explaining the requirements for the performance presentations, but Lisa barely heard a word of it. Her mind was reeling from what had just happened. She sat frozen in her seat, staring down at her notebook where she had automatically written Chopin Ballade No. 1 at the top of a fresh page. As students began packing up their bags at the end of class, Lisa remained seated, still processing the situation. A few classmates approached her with sympathetic expressions. That's really rough, said the violin girl, whose name Lisa thought was Jennifer. I've heard that piece before, and it's seriously intense. Maybe you could talk to him after class and get it changed? Another student nodded in agreement. Yeah, that seems really unfair. I mean, no offense, but if you don't have much piano experience, that's like asking someone who's never driven a car to compete in the Indianapolis 500. Their well-meaning comments only made Lisa feel worse. She managed to mumble her thanks for their concern and gathered her things, eager to escape the classroom before Professor Williams could see how shaken she was. Walking across campus to her car, Lisa felt a strange mixture of emotions churning inside her. There was humiliation, certainly, and anger at being set up for failure so deliberately. But underneath those feelings was something else, a familiar stirring that she had tried so hard to suppress for years. The ballade. She could almost hear the opening notes in her mind, the gentle melody that gradually built into something magnificent and powerful. Her fingers tingled with muscle memory, remembering the feel of the keys beneath them, the way her hands had once moved across the keyboard with confidence and grace. For just a moment, sitting in her car in the college parking lot, Lisa allowed herself to remember what it felt like to truly play that piece. Not just the notes and the technique, but the emotion and the story it told, the way it could make an audience hold its breath during the quiet passages and then surge with excitement during the dramatic climaxes. Then reality crashed back down on her. That was the past, and this was now. She was a 28-year-old college student who worked at a diner and could barely afford her textbooks. She wasn't the talented teenager who had once made that piece sing with life and passion. But as she started her car and drove home, one thought kept echoing in her mind. Professor Williams had no idea what he had just done. He thought he was humiliating her, setting her up for failure, proving some point about knowing one's place. What he had actually done was assign her the one piece of music that could possibly draw her back to the piano. The question was, did she have the courage to face it? That evening, Lisa sat at her small kitchen table staring at the sheet music she had printed from the library computer. The black notes scattered across the white pages looked like tiny soldiers marching toward battle, and she was their reluctant general. Her mother was working the night shift at the hospital where she cleaned offices, which meant Lisa had the apartment to herself for the first time in weeks. The silence felt heavy around her. In the corner of her bedroom, behind stacks of textbooks and old magazines, the piano waited under its dusty sheet like a sleeping giant. Lisa had avoided looking at it directly for months now, but tonight she couldn't ignore its presence any longer. She walked slowly to her bedroom and stood in front of the covered instrument. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the corner of the sheet. With one quick motion, she pulled it away, revealing the beautiful mahogany surface that had once been polished to a mirror shine. Now it was dull with neglect. But the piano was still magnificent. Running her fingers along the closed lid, Lisa felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. This piano had been her grandmother's pride and joy, passed down to Lisa when the old woman died 5 years ago. It was the only thing of real value their family had ever owned, and Lisa's mother had insisted they keep it despite the cramped space in their small apartment. "Your grandmother would want you to have it," her mother had said at the time. "Maybe someday you'll play again," but someday had never come. Until now. Lisa lifted the lid carefully, revealing the familiar black and white keys that had once been like extensions of her own fingers. She pressed middle C gently, and the sound rang out clear and true in the quiet apartment. The piano was surprisingly well-tuned considering how long it had been neglected. She sat down on the old bench and placed her hands in position over the keys. Her muscle memory kicked in immediately, and she found herself playing a simple scale, without even thinking about it. The sound filled the room, and for a moment it felt like coming home after a very long journey. But then she looked down at the Chopin sheet music beside her, and reality crashed back. This wasn't just about playing piano again. This was about performing one of the most difficult pieces ever written in front of a classroom full of people who expected her to fail. The first few measures of the ballade were deceptively simple, a gentle, almost melancholy melody that could fool someone into thinking the piece was easy. Lisa's fingers found the notes automatically, the opening phrase flowing from her hands, as if she had played it yesterday instead of 5 years ago. But as she continued, the memories came flooding back with each measure. She remembered being 16 and spending hours perfecting the rapid passages in the middle section. She could hear her old teacher's voice correcting her posture, encouraging her to feel the emotion behind every note. Most painfully, she remembered, the last time she had performed this piece at a competition just weeks before everything fell apart. The technical passages that had once been second nature now felt clumsy under her fingers. Her hands had grown soft from years of carrying plates and washing dishes instead of practicing scales. The complex runs that used to sparkle now sounded muddy and uncertain. After struggling through the first page, Lisa stopped and put her head in her hands. This was impossible. Even if she still remembered the piece, her technique was nowhere near what it used to be. How could she possibly perform this in front of Professor Williams and her classmates in just 8 weeks? The next morning brought new challenges. Lisa had to be at the diner by 6 a.m. for the breakfast shift, which meant getting up at 5 to catch the bus across town. As she served coffee and scrambled eggs to the early morning customers, her mind kept drifting back to the piano and the impossible task ahead of her. "You look tired, honey," said Mrs. Patterson, one of the regular customers who came in every Tuesday for the senior discount breakfast special. "Everything okay at home?" Lisa forced a smile as she refilled the elderly woman's coffee cup. "Just school stuff, Mrs. Patterson, nothing I can't handle." But deep down, she wasn't sure that was true. During her afternoon break between shifts, Lisa made her way to the college music building. She had never used the practice rooms before, but she knew they were available to students taking music courses. The hallway was lined with small rooms, each containing an upright piano and a music stand. Most of the rooms were occupied by serious music students running through scales, etudes, and pieces that sounded far beyond Lisa's current abilities. She found an empty room at the end of the hall and slipped inside, closing the door behind her. The upright piano was old and slightly out of tune, nothing like the beautiful instrument waiting at home, but it would have to do for times when she couldn't practice at home without disturbing the neighbors. Lisa pulled out her sheet music and tried to work through the piece slowly, one hand at a time. The muscle memory was there, buried under years of neglect, but bringing it back to life was proving more difficult than she had expected. Her left hand, which used to handle the complex bass lines with ease, now stumbled over passages that had once been automatic. After an hour of frustrating practice, she heard a knock on the door. Before she could respond, it opened to reveal a young man she recognized from Professor Williams' class. "Oh, sorry," he said, looking embarrassed. "I thought this room was empty. I heard someone playing the Chopin ballet and figured it was one of the advanced students." Lisa felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. I was just leaving, she said quickly, gathering her sheet music. Wait, the young man said, stepping into the room. That was you playing? I'm Kevin from music appreciation class. I have to say, I'm impressed. That piece is seriously challenging. Lisa looked at him suspiciously, wondering if he was making fun of her. I'm just trying to get through it, she said quietly. Are you kidding? I've been playing piano for 12 years and I wouldn't even attempt that piece. Professor Williams really threw you into the deep end, didn't he? There was genuine sympathy in Kevin's voice, and Lisa felt some of her defensiveness melting away. I guess he thought I needed a challenge, she said with a weak smile. Well, if you ever need someone to listen and give feedback, I'd be happy to help, Kevin offered. I practice here most afternoons around this time. After Kevin left, Lisa sat alone in the small practice room, feeling more conflicted than ever. Part of her was terrified that people were starting to notice her playing, but another part felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe she wasn't as rusty as she thought. The days fell into a pattern. Lisa would wake up early for her morning shift at the diner, attend her afternoon classes, and then spend whatever time she could find practicing. Some days it was in the college practice rooms, other days at home when her mother was at work. Each practice session was a battle between her past and present. The music would flow beautifully for a few measures, making her remember why she had loved playing so much. Then she would hit a difficult passage and stumble, reminding her of how far she had fallen from her former abilities. The emotional weight was almost harder to bear than the technical challenges. Every note of the ballad carried memories of her grandmother's encouraging words, of competition victories, of dreams that had seemed so achievable once upon a time. Playing this piece again was like reopening old wounds that had never properly healed. One evening, as Lisa worked through a particularly difficult section, her mother came home early from work and heard the music drifting from the bedroom. Lisa? Her mother called softly, appearing in the doorway. I haven't heard you play in so long. Lisa's hands froze over the keys. I have to learn this piece for school, she explained, not meeting her mother's eyes. Her mother sat down on the edge of the bed, listening as Lisa reluctantly continued playing. You know, she said after a few minutes, your grandmother always said music was your gift. She never understood why you stopped. Things change, Mom, Lisa replied, her voice tight with emotion. Sometimes they change back, her mother said, gently. Maybe this is the universe giving you another chance. But Lisa wasn't sure she wanted another chance. The life she had built without music was safe and predictable. She knew exactly what was expected of her. Work hard, pay the bills, take care of family. Music had always been unpredictable, full of hope and disappointment in equal measure. As the weeks passed and the performance date grew closer, Lisa found herself caught between two worlds. During the day, she was the quiet student and hard-working waitress that everyone expected her to be. But in the stolen moments at the piano, she was someone else entirely, someone she had almost forgotten existed. The question that haunted her wasn't whether she could learn the piece in time. Deep down, she knew her muscle memory and musical instincts were strong enough to pull it off, even if imperfectly. The real question was whether she was brave enough to let people see who she really was underneath the plain exterior she had worked so hard to maintain. Because once she sat down at that piano in front of Professor Williams and her classmates, there would be no hiding anymore. The music would reveal everything she had kept buried for 5 long years. And Lisa wasn't sure she was ready for the world to see her true self again. The morning of the performance arrived gray and drizzly, matching Lisa's mood perfectly. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing between the piece she would have to perform and all the ways it could go wrong. Her alarm went off at 6 a.m., but she had been staring at the ceiling for hours already. Lisa's hands shook as she poured coffee into her travel mug. The apartment felt unusually quiet without her mother's morning routine. She had taken an extra shift at the hospital to help cover their monthly expenses. Lisa was grateful for the solitude, but part of her wished she had someone to talk to, someone to help calm her nerves. She had chosen her outfit carefully the night before, a simple black dress that her mother had bought her for job interviews, paired with low heels that wouldn't slip on the piano pedals. Looking at herself in the bathroom mirror, Lisa barely recognized the person staring back. She looked more put together than usual, but her eyes betrayed the storm of emotions churning inside her. The bus ride to campus felt like it took forever and no time at all. Lisa clutched her bag containing the sheet music she no longer needed. The piece was burned into her memory after weeks of intense practice. Other passengers chatted about their day ahead, completely unaware that the quiet woman in the black dress was about to face the most terrifying moment of her life in years. Walking across campus, Lisa's legs felt unsteady. Students hurried past her, focused on their own concerns and deadlines. She envied their normalcy, their ability to worry about regular things like exam grades and weekend plans. None of them were about to expose their deepest secrets in front of a classroom full of strangers. The music building seemed more imposing than usual as Lisa approached. Through the windows, she could see other students warming up in practice rooms, their fingers dancing across keyboards with the casual confidence she once possessed. The sound of scales and arpeggios drifted through the hallways, creating a soundtrack to her mounting anxiety. Classroom 204 was already buzzing with activity when Lisa arrived. A small digital piano had been set up at the front of the room, connected to speakers so everyone could hear clearly. Professor Williams was adjusting the height of the bench and testing the sound levels, his usual coffee mug sitting nearby. Lisa took her familiar seat in the back corner, hoping to delay her turn as long as possible. Her classmates were chatting nervously among themselves, some running through fingering patterns in the air, others humming their pieces under their breath. The energy in the room was electric with pre-performance jitters. "All right, everyone," Professor Williams called out, checking his watch. "Let's begin. I'm looking forward to hearing what you've all prepared. Remember, I'll be grading not just on technical execution, but on your understanding of the historical context and musical structure of your piece." The first student to perform was Jennifer, the violin girl who wanted to be a music therapist. She had prepared a Bach piece that she played competently, if not particularly memorably. Professor Williams nodded approvingly and made notes on his grading sheet. One by one, students made their way to the front of the room. Kevin performed a Mozart sonata movement with solid technique and clear understanding of the classical style. Another student played a Debussy piece with appropriate impressionistic flair. Each performance was respectable, showing the students had done their homework and practiced diligently. Lisa watched each performance with growing dread. These were exactly the kind of solid, predictable presentations Professor Williams expected. Safe choices, performed at an appropriate skill level, demonstrating basic understanding without taking any real risks. She was about to shatter that comfortable pattern completely. "Thompson," Professor Williams called out, consulting his list. "You're up next." The classroom fell silent as Lisa stood up. She could feel every pair of eyes following her as she walked to the front of the room. Her legs felt like they were made of jelly, but somehow she managed to put one foot in front of the other. Sitting down at the digital piano, Lisa adjusted the bench to the right height and placed her hands on the keys. The instrument felt foreign compared to her grandmother's piano at home, but she had practiced on this exact model during her preparation. The keys were weighted properly, and the sound quality was better than she had expected. She looked out at her classmates, all waiting to see how badly she would embarrass herself with the impossible piece Professor Williams had assigned her. Some faces showed sympathy, others barely concealed amusement. Professor Williams sat with his pen ready, probably prepared to take notes on all the mistakes she was about to make. Taking a deep breath, Lisa closed her eyes for just a moment. In that brief silence, she let herself remember who she used to be. Not Lisa the waitress or Lisa the struggling student, but Lisa the musician. The girl who could make a piano sing with emotion and technical brilliance that left audiences breathless. When she opened her eyes and placed her fingers on the keys, something fundamental shifted inside her. The opening notes of Chopin's ballad, Number 1, floated through the room like a gentle whisper. The melody was deceptively simple at first, almost conversational in its intimacy. But there was something in the way Lisa shaped each phrase that made everyone lean forward in their seats. This wasn't the tentative playing they had expected from someone with limited experience. As the piece developed, Lisa's body language transformed completely. Her shoulders relaxed, Her posture became naturally graceful, and her hands moved across the keys with the fluid confidence of someone who belonged there. The nervous, uncertain woman who had walked to the piano had disappeared, replaced by a true artist. The technical passages that had terrorized other piano students flowed from Lisa's fingers like water. Complex runs sparkled and danced, while the left hand provided a rich harmonic foundation that showed deep understanding of the music structure. But more than just technical skill, Lisa was telling a story with every note. Professor Williams' pen had stopped moving completely. His mouth was slightly open as he watched and listened, trying to reconcile what he was hearing with what he thought he knew about his student. This wasn't just competent playing. This was the kind of performance you might hear in a professional concert hall. Around the room, students had pulled out their phones to record what they were witnessing. They might not have understood all the technical complexities of what Lisa was doing, but they knew they were experiencing something extraordinary. The music seemed to fill every corner of the classroom, creating an atmosphere of hushed reverence. As the piece built toward its dramatic climax, Lisa's playing became even more intense. Her whole body was engaged with the music, swaying slightly, as she navigated the most challenging passages with breathtaking skill. The emotional weight of the piece, all the longing, struggle, and triumph embedded in Chopin's composition, poured through her performance. When she reached the final section, where the opening melody returns transformed and elevated, tears began streaming down Lisa's face. She wasn't crying from nerves or fear anymore, but from the overwhelming emotion of reconnecting with the part of herself she had buried for so long. Each note felt like coming back to life after years of merely existing. The last chord rang out, in the now silent classroom, hanging in the air like a question that didn't need an answer. Lisa sat motionless at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, as if she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. For several seconds, nobody moved or spoke. The silence was complete and profound, the kind that follows only the most powerful performances. Then, slowly, Kevin started clapping. Others joined in until the entire classroom was applauding with genuine enthusiasm and amazement. Professor Williams stood up from his desk, his expression a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and dawning realization. He approached the piano where Lisa still sat, looking dazed by what she had just accomplished. "Ms. Thompson," he said quietly, his voice barely audible above the continuing applause, "I think we need to talk." Lisa finally turned to look at him, her cheeks still wet with tears but her eyes clearer than they had been in years. She had done it. She had played the piece not just competently, but brilliantly. More importantly, she had found her way back to the person she was meant to be. The secret she had guarded so carefully was now completely exposed. There would be no more hiding, no more pretending to be just another struggling student with limited abilities. Everyone in that room now knew that Lisa Thompson was something extraordinary, and there was no going back to the safe anonymity she had maintained for so long. As the applause finally died down and other students began gathering around the piano to ask questions and offer congratulations, Lisa realized that her life had just changed forever. The performance was over, but in many ways this was just the beginning. The classroom remained unusually quiet even after the applause died down. Lisa sat at the piano, her hands still trembling slightly from the intensity of what had just happened. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, but for the first time in years the attention didn't make her want to disappear. Instead, she felt strangely calm, as if a weight she had been carrying for years had finally been lifted from her shoulders. Professor Williams approached the piano slowly, his face showing a mixture of emotions that Lisa couldn't quite read. The confidence and condescension he usually carried had been completely replaced by something that looked almost like embarrassment. "Ms. Thompson," he said quietly, so only she could hear, "would you mind staying after class? I think we have quite a bit to discuss." Lisa nodded, still not trusting her voice to remain steady. Around her, classmates were whispering excitedly among themselves, their phones still recording as they tried to process what they had just witnessed. "That was incredible," Jennifer said, approaching the piano with wide eyes. "I mean, I've been playing violin for years, and I've never heard anything like that in person. Where did you learn to play like that?" Before Lisa could answer, Kevin jumped in. "I told you guys she was good when I heard her practicing. But this was something else entirely. Lisa, you could be performing in concert halls." Other students gathered around, all talking at once. Some wanted to know about her background. Others asked for advice about their own playing. A few were showing their friends the videos they had recorded, watching Lisa's performance again with amazement. "Okay, everyone," Professor Williams called out, trying to regain control of his classroom. "Let's give Ms. Thompson some space. We still have 3 more performances to get through today." But the energy in the room had completely shifted. The remaining students performed their pieces competently, but everyone's attention kept drifting back to Lisa and the extraordinary performance they had just witnessed. Nothing could compare to what they had experienced, and everyone knew it. When class finally ended, students filed out slowly, many stopping to speak with Lisa one more time. Kevin lingered near the door. "Hey," he said, "I know Professor Williams wants to talk to you, but if you ever want to grab coffee and talk about music, I'd love to hear your story. What you did today was, well, it was life-changing to watch." After the last student left, Professor Williams closed the door and returned to where Lisa still sat at the piano. He pulled up a chair and sat down across from her, his usual, authoritative demeanor completely gone. "I owe you an apology," he began, his voice much softer than Lisa had ever heard it. "I made assumptions about you based on your appearance and background, and I deliberately assigned you that piece thinking it would teach you some kind of lesson about knowing your place." Lisa looked at him with surprise. She had suspected his motives weren't entirely innocent, but hearing him admit it so directly was unexpected. "The truth is," he continued, "I've been teaching for 23 years and I've never heard a student perform at that level. Not even close. You played that piece with the skill and interpretation of a professional concert pianist. So I have to ask, who are you really?" For a moment, Lisa considered giving him a simple answer, maybe saying she had just practiced really hard. But sitting there at the piano, still feeling the echo of the music in her hands, she realized she was tired of hiding. "My name is Lisa Thompson," she said slowly, "and I was supposed to start at the Juilliard School when I was 16. Professor Williams's eyes widened. "Juilliard? But you said you had no formal training." "I lied," Lisa admitted. "Or at least I didn't tell the whole truth. I've been playing piano since I was 5. My grandmother taught me at first, then I had lessons with some really good teachers. By the time I was 15, I was winning regional competitions and getting offers from conservatories." "What happened?" Professor Williams asked gently. Lisa took a deep breath. This was the part she had never talked about with anyone, the painful truth that had derailed everything. "My father was injured in a construction accident right before I was supposed to start at Juilliard. The medical bills were enormous, and my family needed me to work, not go to school. So I turned down the scholarship and got a job instead." The professor listened in silence as Lisa continued her story. She told him about the years of working multiple jobs, about putting her dreams aside to help support her family, about gradually convincing herself that music was just a childhood fantasy she needed to outgrow. "I covered the piano at home and tried to forget about it," she said. "For 5 years I didn't play a single note. I thought I had moved on, built a new life. Then you assigned me that piece, and everything came flooding back." Professor Williams shook his head in disbelief. "Lisa, do you understand what you've given up? That level of talent, it's extraordinary. I've heard professors at major conservatories who don't play with your sensitivity and technical skill." "I know," Lisa said quietly. "But life doesn't always work out the way we plan." "Maybe not," the professor agreed. "But sometimes life gives us second chances. What you did today, people need to hear that. You can't keep that gift hidden." Over the next few days, Lisa's life began to change in ways she never could have imagined. The videos that her classmates had recorded started spreading on social media, shared by friends and family who couldn't believe what they were seeing. Within a week, the videos had been viewed thousands of times, with comments pouring in from people all over the world. "I can't stop watching this," wrote one commenter. The emotion in her playing brought me to tears. "This is what happens when someone truly understands music," said another. "You can hear her soul in every note." But it wasn't just random internet fame that found Lisa. The videos reached people in the classical music world who recognized the extraordinary talent they were witnessing. She started receiving emails from music teachers, concert promoters, and even recording executives who wanted to know more about the mysterious pianist who had seemingly appeared from nowhere. The most meaningful message came from Dr. Rodriguez, a professor at the local state university's music department. He had seen the video and wanted to meet with Lisa to discuss her future. "I've been teaching piano for 30 years, he told her when they met at a coffee shop near campus. "What I heard in that video is the kind of natural musicality that can't be taught. It has to be born in someone and then carefully nurtured. You have something very special." Dr. Rodriguez explained that the university had a graduate program for students with exceptional talent but non-traditional backgrounds. He could offer her a full scholarship along with opportunities to perform and eventually teach. "I know you've been away from serious music for several years," he said, "but talent like yours doesn't just disappear. With some focused work, you could be performing professionally again within a year or two." Lisa felt overwhelmed by the possibilities opening up before her. After years of accepting that her dreams were permanently dead, suddenly people were telling her they were not only alive but within reach. The hardest conversation was with her mother, who had always felt guilty about Lisa's sacrifice. "I never wanted you to give up music for us," her mother said, tears in her eyes as they sat together at their small kitchen table. "Your grandmother always said you had a gift that was meant to be shared with the world." "But we needed the money," Lisa protested. "The family needed me to work." "The family needed you to be happy," her mother replied firmly. "And you were never truly happy after you stopped playing. I could see it in your eyes every day." 3 months later, Lisa stood backstage at the university's concert hall, preparing for her first public performance in over 5 years. She was wearing an elegant black gown that Dr. Rodriguez had helped her choose, and her hands were steady on the familiar sheet music. The audience was a mixture of university students, faculty, and community members who had heard about the remarkable pianist who had been discovered in a humble music appreciation class. In the front row sat her mother, Professor Williams, and Kevin from her original class, all beaming with pride. As Lisa walked onto the stage and approached the beautiful grand piano, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The years of struggle and sacrifice hadn't been wasted. They had given her a deeper understanding of life that now enriched her music in ways she never could have imagined as a teenager. She sat down at the piano and placed her hands on the keys, feeling the familiar sense of coming home. The piece she had chosen for tonight was the same Chopin ballade that had started it all, but this time she wasn't playing it as a desperate attempt to hide or prove anything. She was playing it as herself, Lisa Thompson, the woman who had found her way back to her true calling through the most unexpected of paths. As the first notes filled the concert hall, Lisa smiled. "Sometimes the longest journey is the one that brings you back to where you belong,"